The hallway was quiet, too quiet for a place meant to heal. Fluorescent lights hummed above the sterile floor, each flicker echoing against the long stretch of white walls. Then came the bark, sharp, relentless, and full of something no one could quite name. The K9, trained and disciplined, stood frozen before room 213. Inside that closed door was supposed to be nothing, an empty patient room awaiting cleaning. Yet the dog refused to move. And when hospital security finally checked the surveillance footage from the night before, what they saw on that hallway camera defied everything they understood about reason and about fear. Here is the full story. But before we jump in, one click can change everything for you here. Hit like, subscribe, and let us see how deep this story really goes. Rain hammered against the windows of St. Hollow Hospital as the clock ticked past midnight. The last of the visitors had gone home, and the air hung heavy with disinfectant and silence. Officer Mark Evans walked alongside his K9 partner Shadow through the East Wing, an old section of the hospital rarely used anymore. Shadow's nails tapped sharply against the linoleum floor. His ears twitched at every echo. Evans had brought him in after a reported break-in earlier that night. The hospital's night staff had seen strange movement on one of the lower cameras, a blurred figure near the closed patient wing. The trail had gone cold quickly, but then Shadow froze. His body stiffened, tail raised, nostrils flaring as he faced a single closed room. Room 213. Evans looked at the door. A faded yellow cleaning notice hung on it. The lock was old, its keyhole scratched. Shadow barked once, then again deeper this time, more urgent. Each bark bounced off the sterile walls like a warning. Evans checked his light. The beam swept across the door's surface, no signs of movement. But Shadow refused to leave. He circled the door, nose pressed against the lower seam, whining low. Then, out of nowhere, he backed away, fur rising, teeth bare, and barked again at the empty space above the door handle. Evans followed the light upward. There, faint fingerprints smudged along the metal, recent ones. Someone had been here. He radioed in for a quick camera check. The night guard confirmed the East Wing feed had gone down 2 hours earlier, static since 11:10 p.m. No record, no trace. Evans felt a chill. The air around room 213 was colder than the rest of the corridor. Shadow's breathing grew heavier, each huff visible in the beam of the flashlight. Then the K9 lunged, paw striking the lower edge of the door, and something rattled inside the room, a soft metallic clink, like a tool falling. Evans' heart pounded as he reached for the handle. It was locked tight. Shadow's eyes tracked something along the bottom of the door as if following a moving shadow. Then came the sound, a slow creak from inside, like footsteps dragging across tile. Evans took a step back, tightening his grip on the flashlight. But before he could radio for backup, the old hallway camera, the one that had been offline for hours, suddenly powered back on by itself. Lens turning to face room 2. Evans took a step back, tightening his grip on the flashlight. But before he could radio for backup, the old hallway camera, the one that had been offline for hours, suddenly powered back on by itself. Lens turning to face room 213, and in that single moment both man and dog froze as the air filled with a low mechanical hum. The faint hum of the reactivated camera grew louder, almost alive in the still air. Evans turned toward it, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The red indicator light on the camera blinked once, then twice, before going completely dark again. Shadow growled low, body tense, staring up at the lens as if he could sense something unseen watching back. For a moment, nothing moved, only the faint buzz of hospital machinery somewhere deep in the walls. Evans felt a strange current run through the hallway, not sound, but vibration. It traveled underfoot like a pulse, faint but steady. He crouched to calm Shadow, but the K9's attention was fixed ahead, at the door that should have led to nothing. The East Wing lights flickered one by one. Evans looked down the corridor. Every other door was slightly ajar, as if the building itself had exhaled. He took a slow breath and moved toward the wall panel near the closed room. The security power grid map was outdated, labels faded from years of neglect. But one indicator glowed faintly, a motion trigger light right behind room 213. Evans checked his radio again. Static, nothing but static. He tapped it twice, the hiss breaking for a second before fading completely. Shadow's growl shifted to a deep whine. He stepped closer to the door and pressed his paw against the crack beneath it. That was when Evans noticed the smell. Faint, sterile, mixed with something else. Metallic. Blood, or something close to it. He turned his flashlight beam upward again. This time he caught a flash of movement reflected in the metal door sign, just for a split second. Something passing by inside the room. Too tall to be a person crouching, too quick to be human. Evans instinctively stepped back, adrenaline hitting hard. Shadow barked sharply, the sound bouncing across the hall and echoing deep into the west wing. Then silence. He checked the old security monitor on the wall, the one connected to the hallway's camera feed. Its screen flickered once, static swirling into half-formed shapes. Then it stabilized. There, in the grainy footage, was the image of himself and Shadow standing in front of the door. Except there was something else. In the reflection behind them, further down the hall, another figure stood still, motionless, facing away. Evans turned instantly, nothing there. The hallway was empty. Shadow's head tilted, nose up, catching something. He moved away from the door, not scared, but drawn down toward the end of the hall where the elevator doors were sealed shut. Evans followed, the beam of light gliding across old, peeling paint. That was when he saw another detail, a patient wristband lying near the elevator floor, streaked with dried red. He leaned closer. The name was half scratched out, but one word was still visible: Mason. Evans remembered that name, a patient from 3 years earlier, one who had gone missing from St. Hollow before the East Wing was permanently closed, never found. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he realized the motion trigger, the camera turning, the cold air. Every sign pointed to this forgotten part of the hospital being anything but empty. Shadow began scratching at the elevator door now, growling with focused intensity. The old control panel beside it blinked faintly, the button for the basement lit up on its own. Evans stared at it, frozen in disbelief. The elevator had been disconnected for years. Then, without warning, the doors shuttered and slowly began to open. A rush of cold air hit them both, carrying with it the faint scent of rust, old earth, and something long hidden. Evans raised his flashlight toward the black opening, but before the beam could reveal what was inside, the power went out completely. Shadow barked once, loud and sharp. The sound echoed endlessly into the dark shaft, and from deep below, something answered back. Not a bark, something else entirely. Darkness swallowed the corridor whole. Evans stood motionless, pulse pounding in his ears. He could not see Shadow anymore, only hear the faint scrape of the dog's claws shifting beside him. A single emergency light flickered on near the ceiling, casting long, trembling shadows along the walls. The elevator doors were still half open, revealing a narrow black void below. Cold air rose from it like breath from the ground. Evans shone his flashlight downward. The beam pierced maybe 10 feet before vanishing into thick dust. There, faintly, something metallic glimmered, a piece of rail, a loose cable, maybe more. Shadow was already standing at the edge, tail rigid, eyes locked on the dark below. Evans hesitated, then pulled a backup flare from his vest. He cracked it open. Red light flooded the hall, painting every surface in crimson haze. He tossed it into the shaft. The flare spiraled down slowly, sparks spinning through the stale air. Then it hit the ground. What it revealed should not have been there. A space larger than the elevator pit should have allowed stretched below, lined with concrete and old equipment. And along the far wall, behind shattered glass panels, stood several medical beds covered in torn sheets. The kind of setup that looked temporary, secretive, abandoned in a hurry. Evans felt the chill deepen. He had never heard of any basement treatment area in St. Hollow. Shadow let out a deep bark and leaned closer, sniffing at the air. The smell grew stronger, metallic, mixed with mold. Evans found an old ladder fixed to the wall beside the elevator frame. He took hold carefully, signaling for Shadow to wait, but the dog was already moving, slipping down the first few rungs beside him. They reached the bottom after a long descent. The red glow from the flare flickered against the cracked floor tiles, illuminating faint boot prints, several of them leading away from the shaft toward a corridor at the far end. Evans followed cautiously, gunlights sweeping the walls. Old papers littered the floor, patient forms half-burned, dated over a decade ago. Some bore the same name he had seen on the wristband, Mason. Others had no names at all, only numbers. The corridor opened into a room. Rows of sealed containers stood along the walls, covered in dust and labeled with faint medical codes. Shadow's posture shifted suddenly, ears back, nose pressed against one container in particular. His growl echoed deep. Evans lifted the lid slightly. Inside lay several old blood vials, each marked Expiry 2012. But there was something else, a small recording device taped beneath the lid, corroded but intact. He pressed play. A burst of static, then a faint voice filled the cold air, distorted, broken. It mentioned testing procedures, isolation, and then containment failure. Evans froze. The timeline made no sense. The East Wing had been shut down in 2013 after a short power fire, officially unrelated to any patients. Yet this recording suggested an entire experiment had been buried under it. He stepped back, breathing quick and shallow. That was when Shadow barked sharply toward the far side of the room. Evans swung the flashlight. There, another door, smaller, metal, rusted shut. Shadow was pawing at it, growling harder than before. Evans kicked it once, the hinges cracking open. Inside, another small chamber waited, and on the wall, a camera still running on faint internal power. Its red light blinked slowly. Evans stared at the screen beside it, an old monitor replaying looped footage. The hallway, room 213, and in the corner of the feed, a blurry figure walking toward the camera, head tilted down, moving without sound. As it drew closer, Evans could make out a hospital gown, one arm hanging limp, eyes reflecting the light. Then the date stamp appeared in the corner of the footage.
Last night.
Evans staggered back, gripping the console. The footage looped again, only this time, as the figure neared the camera, something new appeared beside it, a faint shape low to the ground. Canine outline, moving in sync with the figure. Shadow's ears flattened. He growled deep, tail stiff. Evans felt his stomach turn cold. Whatever was caught on that feed, it was still down here. From somewhere behind them, deep in the corridor, came the slow, heavy sound of footsteps on tile. Measured, uneven, getting closer. Evans turned toward the sound, flashlight shaking in his hand. Shadow stepped forward first, muscles tight, growl rising into a bark that filled the underground space. But as the light hit the corridor ahead, it was empty, only dust swirling in the red glow. Then the camera on the wall clicked, turning slightly toward them as if reacting on its own. And the monitor changed again, now showing not the hallway, but the very room they were standing in. Live feed, both of them visible on screen. And behind them, another shape moving slowly out of the dark. The live feed glowed against the concrete wall, casting trembling light across the room. Evans could see himself on the screen, standing motionless beside Shadow. But behind them, a faint blur of motion moved closer, slow and deliberate. He spun around, nothing but cold air and echo. The red flare had burned low, its light now dimming into shadow. Shadow's bark ripped through the silence, sharp, protective, commanding. His stance widened, head low, eyes fixed on something Evans could not yet see. Then a shape emerged at the far end of the corridor, pale, uneven, half limping. He spun around, nothing but cold air and echo. The red flare had burned low, its light now dimming into shadow. Shadow's bark ripped through the silence, sharp, protective, commanding. His stance widened, head low, eyes fixed on something Evans could not yet see. Then a shape emerged at the far end of the corridor, pale, uneven, half limping. Then the figure dropped to the floor. Not in collapse, but in surrender. As the body hit the ground, Evans caught sight of a thin chain around its wrist. Attached to it was a metal tag engraved with one word, Mason. He approached slowly, pulse hammering. The patient's chest rose and fell, shallow but alive. Beneath the grime and exhaustion, the skin looked pale, not dead but dehydrated, starved. Shadow sniffed along the floor near the figure, then lifted his head sharply toward the camera in the corner. Evans followed the dog's gaze. The live feed had changed again. Now it showed another perspective, the same corridor years earlier, clean, bright, and filled with medical staff. They were moving patients in wheelchairs, covered in sheets. At the back of the group, a man in uniform led a K9 through the hallway. The timestamp flickered, 2013, the day the East Wing had been officially closed. Evans stood frozen as the implication hit him. This was not an accident. The hospital had hidden its own shutdown. Those patients had never been transferred. They had been sealed away beneath the building. He knelt beside Mason, who was whispering faintly now, though no words formed. Shadow stayed close, pressing his head against the man's shoulder, as if recognizing a familiar scent. Evans noticed an old bandage near the wrist, partially torn. Beneath it, a small tattoo. It matched a symbol found on several old police lab files linked to experimental drug testing from the same year. It all connected: the abandoned wing, the erased patients, the missing footage. Evans called for backup. This time his radio responded. Signal restored. He reported the discovery, a survivor found beneath the old East Wing. Moments later, distant footsteps echoed from above as hospital staff and emergency responders moved toward the elevator shaft. Evans looked once more at the feed. It was still showing the same looping hallway, room 213, the door slightly ajar now. He could see himself walking away, carrying Mason out of the basement with Shadow leading ahead, but in the corner of the screen, for just a fraction of a second, another figure appeared, standing beside the open door of room 213, still and silent. Then the feed cut to black. Days later, the news broke quietly. St. Hollow Hospital was under federal investigation for illegal testing and unreported patient fatalities. Evans' footage and Shadow's discovery had triggered the exposure of a cover-up that had lasted more than a decade. At a small ceremony outside the precinct, Shadow stood tall beside his handler as the department awarded him the Medal of Valor. His alert had uncovered what no one else had seen, the truth buried beneath concrete and silence. As Evans knelt beside his partner, the air felt lighter, though the memory of that underground still lingered. Some nights he could still see the faint red glow of the flare in his mind, still hear the hum of that camera turning toward them. Yet in that moment, Shadow simply looked up, calm and still, eyes bright against the evening sun. He had done what instinct told him, to uncover what was hidden, to protect what others had forgotten. And somewhere behind the sealed hospital doors, room 213 remained quiet once again. Only the wind moved through the empty halls, carrying faint echoes of a K9's bark, the sound that had started it all. Some truths stay buried until instinct brings them back to light. Shadow proved that sometimes a single bark can uncover what years of silence tried to hide. If you felt that chill too, stay close. The next case runs even deeper than this one. Make sure you are here when it breaks.